First up, hello and thank you for accepting. The first question I wanted to make you is how long have you been working on this type of things and how future-proof you see your job if you think that in some years an AI could be in your position?
So I've been working in virtual reality since 2016. So it's been about 8 years in VR, but I've been animating in VR for the past maybe five. I've been working on Nightmara for since 2017. Just actually 20. So it's about the same year I've been working in VR. I've been working on Nightmara just as a cartoon and scripting and writing and just having fun with it. But it wasn't until 2020 when I finally developed the skills good enough to create a series out of. And then that's when Facebook reached out and wanted me to test out their new Quill software that introduced a lot new animations for VR, a lot more spatial audio, just a much more impressive software at the time. So, and then I worked on the Nightmara VR animated series for 3 years. Oops. And will AI take over my job? It'll take over some parts of it. It'll take over um, possibly. I mean, in order to do virtual reality animation, you need an insane amount of computer power for if it's just AI creating it. So maybe it could, but you're always going to need a human brain to dictate what makes sense because a computer doesn't know what it makes sense. It doesn't know, it doesn't understand common sense. It doesn't understand what subtext and meaning behind the meaning means for the creator. So it's you'll I believe you'll always, if you want something that's poignant and nuanced and personable, you will always need a human brain behind it, but there will be AI to help aid in concept, in scripting and design and building and animation for sure in the future. No doubt about it. But if you're a good screenwriter, why would you need AI? You know, if you're a good director, you don't want AI to tell you where to put the camera. That's the fun of it. The fun is in the creation of something from nothing. So yes, there will be people who use AI because they're lazy and they're maybe not as talented. Um, but I believe in the human experience, when you're talking to a friend, how much more enjoyable that is than talking to a random stranger on a bus that is annoying you. So I feel that in the future, we are as audience members going to be more sensitive to reality and to real conversation and real thought. And it'll take a while for AI to really grasp the nuance because then you're going to fall into the famous uncanny valley, which means there's a slight bit of offness to a artificial intelligence.
The artificial intelligence is now in development, but yeah. Another thing that I wanted to ask you is what inspired you to make this show and the script, or what did you thought, well, I want to make this, and why did you make it VR? Because in television or even in YouTube it would have had more audience than in VR, which is more small. What did you decide to make it VR, and what inspired you to make that show?
Yep. So the idea of Nightmara came to me actually in 2015. I had three recurring nightmares in a row. The first night, I was in a two-story house, daylight. I was looking outside the window, And I looked out in the window out in the neighborhood and saw this black oily figure wearing a wide brimmed hat staring up at me. And like in that moment, I felt I was in danger. And so I ran to the bed, I hid under the blanket, and then I peeked, make sure that he wasn't there, and he was standing in my room. And I got even more scared, and it went right up to my face and grabbed me, like suffocated me, and I couldn't move. And then I woke up. And then I woke up like, whoa, that was really scary. And then the next night, it happened to me again, but this time I heard a voice say, scream. So I tried to scream, but I couldn't. I was just mute. Nothing could come out. And sure enough, he puts his like black oily hand over my face and I wake up. And so that second day I go, whoa, that same dream, but this time I knew how to get rid of it, but I couldn't. And so then I said, okay, that's weird. If it happens to me again the third night, I'll do whatever I can to scream, to get him away. Sure enough, third night, he's right there in my room. He's over my face. And I go, okay, here's the time. And I feel this like white light come from my toes all the way into my chest. And I just scream, ah, and white light shoots out of my mouth and vaporizes him. And I wake up screaming in sweat. And it was like 4 a.m, just kind of figuring out what just happened. And it was like this idea said, whoa, how did I know how to get rid of this demon character? I felt a voice in my head tell me how to get rid of him. And then this idea kept worming around. I said, what if that was a superpower? What if there are people who can travel into people's nightmares to save them? And then that's the idea that kind of thought, I was like, okay, what would be a interesting character to have this power? And I thought an 11-year-old girl would be hilarious. That would be so much fun, like, to deal with that power and then deal with her attitude and like how did those two meet. And then I started doing research and found that there's many cultures around the world who have a similar demonic god that rules the nightmare kingdom. And it's usually the name is like Mara or Mar. So I was like, oh, Nightmara. And it, like, as soon as I said the name, it clicked. And here she is right there. But so that's how it started. And I wanted to do it TV, because I thought, there's so many people in this world that have fears, and each fear is different. So each episode would be a portal into some random person's nightmare that Mara has to save. So I wanted to do it traditional. I wanted to go to TV, but I tried making an Instagram cartoon. I made a little 13. I made about an 8-minute kind of short on Instagram a long time ago, and people really loved it. But then I ran out of money, and I needed to teach myself animation. So I was using VR to animate already, because that was like the most visceral, and for me it was easier to animate in VR than it was on paper. And I was already working in VR, and then I tried pitching it around Hollywood, and they would get meetings, and I got a couple deals to go through, but no one ever felt like they were the right home for Nightmara. And thankfully I didn't sign anything because they wanted to take everything. So then this was right around 2020 when the pandemic hit, and Facebook had seen my VR animations and said, hey, we really love what you're doing. Do you have anything bigger? And so I pitched them Nightmara as a VR animated series, and they were like, yeah, we love this. This is totally different than anything we've ever done. We would love to do it. And so I wrote up 3 episodes and pitched them, and then tested out their new VR animation software, Quill. And the rest, that's how it happened.
I suppose that nightmare you had was the protagonist of the third chapter that you released this year, that
Yeah.
is like this black inky demon, like you said, right?
Yes. Exactly.
And another thing that I want to ask you is how much time more or less does it take you to make a chapter? I know that from one chapter to another, you use more or less a year, but I suppose that the first one you needed more time, or maybe you don't start directly. I finish the second one, I'm going to start the third one. So more or less, how
Yeah.
much time you spend per chapter?
Yeah. First episode was around 9 months. And I was just learning how to tell a story in VR at that time because I really hadn't done anything longer than maybe 5 minutes for a virtual reality kind of commercial or anything like that. And so the first episode, first chapter took me 9 months to animate and make the characters. Second episode took me, I think, about same similar time, maybe 8 months, because I had already built out the sets that I needed and most of the characters, but there were new characters and new sets to build. Um, but chapter three took me about 12 months because Facebook had fired their audio team. And I also got another contracting job to help me pay to work on Nightmara. So I was working two jobs and also had to do the audio as well for the third chapter. So it was just like the circumstance of kind of the world at the time, or this year, when a lot of tech companies were firing their employees. So I had to do a lot more. Not I mean I had to do the audio too. Um, so it was just and chapter three is bigger. There's a lot more going on, and I learned a lot more. And I wanted to put more into episode three with transitions and animations and characters, and I was testing a bunch of different types of directing in VR, and there was a couple scenes that in at chapter three that I would animate and then put it together and watch it and realize, oh, this doesn't work. So there was a lot of time where I just was testing things out and things wouldn't work. So I just kept redoing it and refining it. So chapter three, I wanted to make sure that it was like the biggest climax of the 3-part series, and it took me a little bit longer, but there was just a lot to do.
Yeah, it's noticeable for the effort it looks the chapter it has made you pass through.
Yeah.
And one last thing, are you thinking in making a fourth chapter, or do you think that these three chapters are a good ending? Because at the end we see the mayor showing the bus driver like also in a coma. So are you planning in making a fourth part?
Yeah, I would love to. That's I'm really busy working on a couple other things for Nightmara. The past 3 years have been really the hardest years of my life, just because I've been in virtual reality almost more than reality. So I've had a headset on my head every day for 3 years. So I'm taking a break for now. I think the 3 episodes do a good story that will tell just enough of Nightmare to pique people's interests. And it also leaves a good cliffhanger to what I could continue to tell. But at this moment, I am taking a break. I'm not doing any Nightmare VR like episodes right now. But maybe next year I'll hop into it. But there's so many other projects that I want to do as well. And continuing on with other Nightmara things, like I created a Nightmara trading card game that I really want to continue with. So I'm going to be making some more cards for that, making some more T-shirts, making more stickers, just a lot. I want to do more things that are not in VR because I've spent a lot of time with a headset on my head the past 3 years.
Yeah, at the end you end up being like, I want to be in reality more like in virtual reality.
Yeah. But
So you
thankfully,
want to work more in the merch, right?
yeah,
In the merch.
yeah. But thankfully, the Nightmara world is so fun to be in. The characters are incredible. I love writing for them. I love being in the world. So yeah, I will love to do a fourth, fifth. Like I've got like 100 episodes planned. Like I know where I want this series to go. I've already set up in all the episodes little things that you don't even know are there that are going to be for future episodes. But right now I'm just taking a break. I need to take a break. It's been a hardcore every day, 24/7, 7 days a week working on Nightmara, and the holidays are coming up, so I'm just taking a break and having fun, doing some other art, doing some other VR animations and stuff, and doing other interviews. And I want to travel to bring Nightmara to other places because, like other conferences, other animation expos, or um, museums to show it off because I think a lot of people want to see this.
Yeah. And the character designs, how did you choose those character designs, for example? The grandmother of Neymar, I think. I don't remember the name right now.
Babs,
Why did
yeah.
you thought, Babs, yeah, why did you thought about that character with that personality,
Yeah,
or maybe the bus driver to be with that personality? Because each character has a different personality that really match up with what Nightmara is going through in that moment. Maybe she needs to go quicker and the bus driver doesn't want to go in a dark alley.
exactly. No, that's exactly right. You've got it down. It's because each character should be an obstacle for the main character. So I created Mara specifically, um, these colors and her shape and everything is for a reason. You know, her shirt is yellow because she represents youth. That we have this really crazy collar that she has on her vest because my two favorite X-Men characters are Gambit and Jubilee. And if you look at Jubilee's character, her her colors are exactly the opposite. So she wears a yellow jacket and a pink shirt and a blue pants. And so I always loved characters with big collars. It's like my favorite kind of attribute of a character. But then in Mara's personality, I wanted to know why Mara has this tough attitude. She's kind of this she's a stinker, you know. She's kind of like a little bit of a outsider, and she grows up with a foster grandmother. Like this is not her. She's not related to Babs, but Babs raised her. But Babs also has her own story that she's going through. Babs wants to be a part of the gossip committee. And the gossip committee are three other old ladies all wearing colorful wigs. And so Babs wants to be a part of that clique, that community, really bad. So Babs will use Mara's powers to get gossip out of people's fears and then spread them to the gossip committee in hopes that she can be part of that really astute gossip committee that she looks up to. But Babs is based off of three people in my life that I grew up with. One is my daycare old lady that basically raised me as well. She wore these really thick glasses and she was tough. Her name was Alice, and she would really let you have it if you did bad, but also love you when you did good. And then one of my old friends growing up, he lived with his grandma, and she was a tough old woman, and she talked like this, like she talked like Babs. And so my best friend would always make us laugh doing an impression of our friend's grandmother. he would start talking like her, like, God, you're so stupid, and just like we would be laughing so hard. And so I always remembered that as a kid, that voice. And then so it's Alice, and then that woman, and then my grandma, my nanny, who was always like my best friend as a kid. And so those three old ladies were the inspiration for Babs. So every character that I create is based off of maybe three people in my life that I kind of merged together, that I've always kept in my head, and just was like, okay, if this character ever comes about, I want to include them, because using real personalities is the best. It's really hard to just create a brand new something, and you should always take from your life and put it and really condense it like a diamond, and to get you a really rounded character. And then the bus
Yeah,
driver, yeah.
there's nothing more real than real life, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think that would be all. I don't have any more question to make you. I don't know if you have any suggestions of something we haven't talked about.
Um, I think the the thing about the future for virtual reality is interesting. The future of television and storytelling haven't been tested in VR yet. I got to test it with Nightmara. Nightmara is one of the first scripted animated series ever. I had nothing to look at to go, oh, that's how they did it. Like TV, I could watch thousands of cartoons and go, okay, we can do it like that. But in VR, there was nothing for me to look at. I had no real ideas of like, oh, I could do this. So everything that I had to do in the VR animated series for Nightmara was all brand new. I had to come up with new ways of transitions. I had to come up with new ways of I had to constantly think, why am I telling a story in VR? How can we do it? How can we do it different than television or film? And a lot of it has to do with presence. So you'll see in each episode, when you're pushed through the scene, you might actually knock over a prop. Like the first episode, you'll zoom into little Ned's eye, but as soon as you do, there's a chair in front of you, and as soon as you go toward him, you knock over the chair. In episode 2, when you're kind of flying through Mara's living room with a television in front of you, and you're kind of flying through the kitchen, there's a pot of plants, and you'll actually zoom past it and you'll knock it over. And then episode 3, you'll knock over a little table in the living room. So I was always having a little fun moments to go, okay, we're in VR. How can I continuously remind people we're in virtual reality? We're in a made up world, because you can't do that in film. You can't do that in television. You can't do that in any other medium but VR. So I had to constantly ask myself, why are we in VR? What can we do differently? And that was probably the most fun, but it also took the longest.
Yeah, and relation with this, now that I'm remembering, it's not only a VR show, but it also has like a comic like style. It also has everything happens in maybe a rectangle with a white outline that you can pick through, but it's like you're in a comic that you can enter. Why did you make it that way? I suppose because of the beginnings of that animation in Instagram you've told, but it's a strange that type of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's two reasons. The number one reason is because Mara is a superhero. I wanted to constantly remind people and put it in their subconscious that this is in a comic book world. We're I wanted to bring comic books, television, and film and just merge them together. And you could have a lot of fun with that, because there's sometimes when Mara would walk and trip over one of the comic book frames. And she'd like look up and be like, what the hell? You know? And so I had a lot of fun doing those things where it would be a meta like commentary on comic books. And then I also, in VR, to do close ups at a different angle, because if you don't have a border and then you put somebody at an angle looking down on a character, if the horizon isn't straight around us, we feel nauseous. So I had to constantly remind myself, like, we have to keep the viewer always thinking that they are looking at a horizon, even though they may look down. So that's why the border is there when we're looking up at a character or we're looking down at a character. So having a border actually tricks the mind into not feeling uneasy. And then you can get really fun moments where you see a rectangle, you see like a comic book panel, but all of a sudden you zoom into that and then it becomes the world. So as a kid in second grade, or when I was, maybe 7 years old, I used to draw comic books as a kid, on white paper, kind of like this a little bit, this is just storyboarding stuff. But I would be outside at school and I wish to be inside my comic book. I remember so bad just wanting to be with my characters. I used to make my own characters. And it wasn't until VR when I first drew my first Mara and looked at her in the eyes and I said, oh my God, this moment happened. I am now in the presence of my creation. So I wanted to bring that love of comic books and the love of film together. And I think VR is the only medium you can really, really do it to the point where you actually have fun doing it.